It's time to get sexy, so watch Secular Sexuality live Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTSS and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callsex.
That is right. That is right, folks. It is time for another episode of Talk Heathen. Today is Sunday, October 9th, and I am your host, Secular Rarity. And joining me is one of my absolute best friends out there. It's student Dr. Ben. What is up, Ben?
What's up? I'm excited to be back on the show this week and excited to be back with Secular Rarity. I think we're becoming a little bit of a dynamic duo here on this show.
We are. We might be getting matching costumes, or rings that we kind of bump together and stuff. But before we talk about all that, let me remind everybody that this show, Talk Heathen, is a live call-in show, and we have some open lines. We've already got some really great calls, it looks like, but we do have some space. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242, or you can always call us from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. So I know, like I said, we've already got a couple of really good ones, it looks like, but we do have some space and we're right at the beginning. So if you get your call in now, you're more likely to get some time to chat with us. So, but before we grab a call, let me just talk to you a little bit about this awesome show. Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. All things that Ben and I are definitely big fans of. And if you like this show and you like what we do here, there are just a ton of ways you can support us. You can go down to tiny.cc/patreon.th and join us there and maybe get your name shouted out like we do every week here. Then pretty simple, just like the video, right? I mean, pretty easy, doesn't take much effort. It's a little thumb, you just click it. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and go ahead and ring that bell so you know when we've got good stuff happening here. And comment below. Tell us about your favorite caller or your least favorite caller, or maybe you like Ben more than me. I mean, that's I would say that is ontologically and axiomatically true. But hey, if you disagree, call us. But there are a couple of other easy things. You can become a channel member, 99 cents a month. You just join below the video. You get all these super sweet chat emotes, and you really help perpetuate the mission here at Talk Heathen and the ACA. And I've been told that, if we get more people joining, like we might get more emotes and Ben's face might show up there. My face might show up there. I don't know.
I think
you
I've
guys,
seen that they have, and there's a picture of me face palming.
there's a
So I
picture
hope
of you.
yeah.
Oh my goodness, guys, we have got to get my face down there. I'm just being selfish and honest here, but
I think it already is, bro.
is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Then
I think it already
I
is.
need to look is what the issue is. I
Yeah.
need to go down there and check. But if it is down there, hey, why not just shoot Ben's face in the chat just a little bit? Just throw it up there and show that beautiful smile. But we are going to get to some calls. But finally, the last thing, below the live chat right now, there is a fundraiser, and 100% of those proceeds go directly to the ACA. YouTube does not charge any fees. It does not pass go. It does not stop in jail. And so that is an absolutely great and super easy way that you can help out here. I think that's more than enough. Ben, are you ready? Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's do it. We have somebody hanging out with us, not too far. Sounds like Austin, him in Texas, has some questions about the terms atheist and agnostic. How are you, Austin?
Hey, how's it going?
No, pretty good. You're here with Secular Rarity and student Dr. Ben. What'd you like to chat with us today about?
Yes, sir. So I was just wanting to discuss. So I feel that there is, obviously there's agnostic and atheist. I am agnostic, and I believe that the attitude that is put forth from atheists seems. So obviously we know that atheism doesn't have a claim to prove, and neither does agnostic, because the claim is to be proven by the person that claims that God exists. But I believe that the attitude that they put forward would insinuate that they believe without a reasonable doubt that there is no God, and therefore I also believe that in that way of speaking, I don't think that atheism is the correct term to use. I think it should be agnostic, because we, as people who don't think that there is significant evidence or sufficient evidence for God, should use agnostic, because agnostic just simply means that we don't know, that there is no proof that we don't know.
So I want to ask, I'm sure that you've probably heard us use the term agnostic atheist. Do you have do you think that we need to stick with one term, or could we use these terms in combination and maybe get more of a nuanced definition there?
Well, I do believe that the use of both words is appropriate for defining someone's particular attitude. Like, for instance, there is Baptist, which, so if someone tells you that they're that they're Baptist, then oh, okay, so you're not a lax Christian. You're more of a more conservative kind of Christian. Whereas it's kind of the same thing with atheism and agnosticism.
That kind of depends, doesn't it, Austin? Like, have you met people that have taken a label before, where ultimately when you press them on what that label means for them personally in their life, that actually they give you a little bit more of a nuanced and maybe kind of, gray area response to it, where like, hey, yeah, I guess technically, I'm a Baptist, I take that label, but I don't exactly practice these things, which are like, traditionally considered part of Baptists, I think where Ben was going earlier was a really good thought, which is we don't have to be so exclusionary on this. We don't have to be so hardcore. It's okay that we have a little bit of give and take, because if we're being honest, all the Christians do, right? All the Muslims, all the Hindus. Like I've talked to so many Hindus who have said to me, "Oh, you don't have to believe in Brahman to be a Hindu." And I'm like, "What? What?" They go, "Yeah, you don't have to worry about any of these stuff. You don't have to sacrifice this. You don't have to care about sacred cows. You don't have to give crap about any of that." Because these labels oftentimes are just a good starting point, right? As opposed to like telling us everything about ourselves. So
don't you believe that that's part of the problem? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, so I think there's a little bit of an issue here with the comparison, if we're going from comparing the term atheist to comparing the term Baptist. So I think we're entering two different tiers of generality. So if we take the general term Christian, right, that includes the Baptists, but it might also include the evangelicals, includes the Anglicans, includes the Catholics. Some people consider the Mormons to fit in this as well. So you have this broad category with these subsets of that category. And I think comparing atheist to Baptist is comparing a broad general term to the specific subsect. And I think if we more liken atheism to Christian, in that this is the broad category, and then underneath atheism, we have agnostic atheism and Gnostic atheism and these other subsets. But I think maybe we're having a little bit of miscommunication when we compare the broader category to a smaller category.
Yeah, and just to jump off of that and kind of go back to what you were asking a second ago, Austin, about whether or not that kind of not completely nailed down terminology that some people use incorrectly, some people use this way, blah blah, is that part of the problem? I would say sure, but I would put it more in the vein of where Ben was just laying it out, where it's a miscommunication between two people that, if we're actively trying to learn from each other, well, then we're gonna actively be listening. We're gonna be charitable when it comes to the things that people tell us. And I think what would be a better route for us all is instead of us coming to these conversations with our preconceived notions, right? Hey, maybe we know every single word in the dictionary and all the etymology and everything, but we should remember that we're communicating with other people. And the whole point is trying to figure out, what's your life like? What's your understanding of this? Let me give you my kind of perspective on it. And if that's the way we're approaching these conversations, then if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I'm a Baptist, well, I'm not going to ascribe anything else to them until they tell me. When somebody comes up to me and says, hey, I'm an atheist, I'm not going to ascribe anything to them until they tell me. I'll say, hey, do you mean that you don't think gods are real? And they'll say, no, I just don't believe, I just don't have any, belief in a deity. It's like, oh, okay, we can work with that and we can move on and continue the conversation. But we've been chatting a bunch here, Austin. We always want your thoughts, man. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I know. I see where you're going with that, and it's not that I disagree, because I do agree, but at the same point, I just so you did ask me earlier. Ask me, well, do I think there should be a defined? And the answer, I didn't really answer you honestly. And yes, I do believe there should be a defined difference between atheism and agnosticism. Simply, if anything, in the dictionary. Like, for instance, the definition off of the dictionary for atheism and agnosticism is basically the same thing. It's if I was to use an analogy, the definition for atheism is I file paperwork, whereas the definition for being agnostic is I file names and phone numbers for particular companies or people based off of.
Do you mind if I kind of jump in, Austin? I know I'm kind of cutting you off a little bit, but do you mind? Because I think what you just brought up is a totally worthwhile thing, in the sense of we try to go to some reputable source that is seemingly gonna kind of help us get clarity on this thing that's a little bit murky right now, and at the end of the day, it kind of seems like maybe it didn't really help as much as we want, right? But the way that dictionaries work more often than not is when enough people that speak this language start using a word a certain way, whether it's correct or not for the meaning of the word as it was originally started to be used, right? It doesn't matter. And at this point in time, in all of the major English dictionaries, there is a section on the word literally where it says this word can also mean metaphorically or figuratively, right? A literal contradiction. And I did use that word correctly there, but I could literally use the word every single sentence and like literally have all these literal things. And I'm still using the word correctly because there is a nuance between it. There is a little bit of a different understanding, just because apparently that's the way we've used it. And for a very long time, people have used the terms agnostic and atheist completely interchangeably with no distinction between them. And I disagree with that. But if I find out that that's what the person that I'm communicating with, if I find out that's the way that they understand those words, well, I'm going to accept that and try and continue the conversation. And maybe at some point, say, hey, I think these might be just a little bit, more nuanced. Maybe they might have a little bit more specificity that would be helpful for you to understand things. But at the end of the day, if somebody comes up to me and says, when they say agnostic, they mean you can't possibly know there's a God. When they say atheist, they mean I just don't have a belief in any deity, nothing more specific. Cool. And that's easy for me in that sense of just trying to be charitable with them and let them tell me how they're using that term. Because again, I just think that's something valuable for all of us to do. But I mean, at the end of the day, you say you take the agnostic, that label of the I don't know, right? Is that what you said?
Right.
Do you think
I don't have sufficient evidence to believe.
Sure. Do you think that also would mean that you would fall into the category of you currently do not have a belief in a deity of any kind?
Correct.
I would say that that is what the vast majority of people would call the softer or weaker form of atheism. It doesn't have anything to do with the strength of the argument. It just literally has to do with how hard of a stance you take on it. So I take the stance that every single God that has ever been proposed to me, I actively make the claim does not exist. But there are conceptions of God that I haven't heard of. And on those, while I may not know, I also still don't believe in them currently. And if we use that softer definition, well, then atheism is just kind of this, pretty broad category, like Ben was talking about earlier, the difference between like Baptist and Christian.
I mean,
Baptist
and
is a little bit more specific.
kind of the same thing too. Like even if we designate agnosticism as a separate label, we run into the same issue, because two people could say that they're agnostic and it still doesn't tell me anything about what they're agnostic about, or their levels of certainty for certain claims. As you could say you're agnostic, but say, yeah, I lean more towards believing in a God than not, but I still don't know for sure. Like, they still probably be able to call themselves agnostic. So I think either way, no matter what label you take on, you're going to have to work further into what specifically they mean. So, and I support the use of labels in whatever way you personally want to use them, as long as you can communicate your thoughts. Because at the end of the day, that's all that labels are really good for, is explaining your point of view to somebody else. So I wouldn't get on somebody else's case about it, but at least that's kind of the way I would see the conversation still needing to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so my question is, and I want to clarify, I don't know which one of you said it, but so whenever you were saying that you would, I don't remember your exact words, because you kind of went over a lot there for a second, but basically, so what you're saying is that, because the reason I harp on it so much about differentiating between, agnosticism, being agnostic and being atheist, is that, in times when you do have a conversation with an evangelical or a Baptist or whatever, which, by the way, I use Baptist, but I just couldn't think of the word evangelical for some reason. I guess under pressure, I just couldn't think of the word. But getting back to my point, I wanted a way to basically streamline the conversation so that they could be conveyed as to what stance I took. But what you're saying is that it would be better to communicate in a way that they would understand. Like, for instance, every Christian or theist knows what an atheist is. So, or at least has a good idea. They may have some misconceptions about it. But in other words, I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So you're saying that it would be best if, for instance, I had a conversation with a theist and I said, oh, I'm atheist. And then later in the conversation, I said, well, technically my label would be agnostic because I don't know for sure. And I take more of a softer stance on it. So I wouldn't be technically an atheist. I'd be agnostic. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think it depends on the situation and it depends on the person you're talking to. Because I think either way, you're going to have to elaborate on what you mean by agnostic or what you mean by atheist. Right. And I would hope that you're having that depth of conversation with them as well. But the language I would use to describe myself largely depends on the other person and where they're trying to go with the conversation. But either way, I would say I am an atheist and this is what I take the position of. And I think that if you're having an honest conversation, then they should be able to listen to what you say your stance is and be able to follow you there. So I think we agree more than we disagree. We just have slightly different approaches for how we're engaging with people. And I think that's totally fine. And people engage differently. So,
and I would just say, sure. I don't know that there is either of those methods or another method that is inherently better. I think we can all probably think of, ways to make the conversation worse, right? But we're going for the how to make it better. And I think you're gonna find that there are some people that have a shorthand for certain concepts because it makes it easier for them to get through the grocery store checkout line. I don't need to tell you every little thing about my childhood and to try to get you to understand and let me pay for my groceries and go home. But sometimes, sometimes it is super important to like take an extra 5 to 10 minutes to just explain a definition of a word so that everybody's on the same page. Because again, exactly like what Ben was saying, if this is a charitable conversation between people that are, actually intended on learning the other side and getting a different perspective, and making some kind of progress, then you don't have to fight as hard. I've found that's not a blanket. Every single conversation is going to be like that, But more often than not, I find when we are being charitable with our interlocutor, and we are letting them kind of, tell us their thoughts and their labels and stuff, it does really help us out. But Austin, we really appreciate you hanging out with us today. I hope we got a little bit of that kind of worked out and maybe a little bit easier for you. But also, hey, try the things and give us a call back and let us know how it went. Like maybe you do kind of go through an explanation next time you're having this conversation and it just goes horribly off the rails, right? Or maybe you make a brand new friend. So either way, you can always give us a call here. But before we grab another call, I have some fun things to shout out to you. If you are shopping on Amazon already, did you know that you can support the ACA at absolutely no cost to you? All you got to do is visit tiny.cc/Amazon Smile ACA, and you designate the atheist community of Austin as your selected charity. And Amazon donates a portion of their profit directly to the ACA. So it doesn't charge you anything. You don't have to do any extra work. Just Amazon throws a little bit of change in the bucket. And that is always, always super helpful. And then, I don't know if you've heard, Ben. I don't know if you know this, Ben. The Talk Heathen merch store is back. Did you know that? Tiny.cc/merch ACA. It's back, man. It is
This whole
freaking
time,
here.
I was agnostic to the fact that the store existed.
Well, no longer. We have the proof. It is right here. You can see it, and you can go get awesome t-shirts and hoodies, coffee mugs, beanies, cell phone cases, tote bags. The sky is the limit, but you can't buy the sky. I've been told that. That is true. So, but every month, by the way, every single show has a special limited edition item. It's not going to be there after the month is over. So you got to go check out the store so that you make sure you get that cool stuff. Okay. And then the last two things, and we'll grab some of these other wonderful calls, but we do still have some lines, people. We got some lines, and we always love talking with people. So if you got thoughts on God or I don't know, ancient books, or maybe you don't think humans are animals, but before we do that, let me remind you, there is a channel that houses all of the ACA shows in podcast form. Check out tiny.cc/AEN podcast. You can hear all of the amazing shows that the ACA does. And finally, make sure to come hang out with us on the Talk Heathen community in the fan run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. That is always a good place to keep the fun and the heathenry going when we are not here live taking your calls. So get there and hang out. But before that, what about some calls, Ben? You ready? You excited?
Let's do it. I'm
right.
ready.
Let's talk with Jasmine, she, her, up in Canada. How are you today, Jasmine?
Hello. Good, thank you.
Yeah,
I want to
go ahead.
I want to talk about assisted dying.
Sure.
It's related to the poll. We treat animals differently than we treat people. And in Canada, assisted dying only came on the books legally in 2016, and in the U.S., I think only 10 states allow it for physician-assisted death.
It might even be a little less, but yeah, it's not a lot.
Yeah. I want to get your guys' opinions on all that, basically.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Ben?
So I'm gonna jump into this because this is my field here. So we know that there are a lot of people that have terminal illnesses, and a lot of times these are very painful. Somebody dying of cancer is not going through an easy time, and there's no way for any of us who aren't experiencing that to really understand the amount of pain and loss of quality of life that they're going through. And what assisted death is, it's not other people making the decision on behalf of this person. There is a specialist that goes through and talks to them about what their goals are for their life and for how they want to pass on. And so it's done when the person is able to make the decision for themselves. So they make sure that this person has the legal capacity to make their own decision. And if this person says that I do not want to exist with poor quality of life, I think that they should be allowed to make that decision for themselves as adults who can consent to what goes on in their body. If they do not want to experience this decline in quality of life, that should be allowed for them. So it's a multitude of factors that kind of would lead someone to make that type of decision. And I think our job in healthcare, with the balance of ethics between beneficence and autonomy, oftentimes autonomy takes precedence. So even if ending a life might be seen as not beneficial to them, autonomy in that case would take priority over the perceived beneficence. Does that make sense?
Let me check. Jasmine, are you still there with us? We might have lost Jasmine. That's okay. I'm gonna put you back in the queue for a second, Jasmine. Hopefully, we can touch base with you. But in the meantime, I will gladly talk a little bit about physician assisted death or death with dignity, because it's something that's very important, and I think you laid it out really well, Ben. Where at the end of the day, it is this individual's life. It is this individual that is dealing with the suffering and the consequences and stuff. And to me, it seems quite absurd that we have to tell somebody that you are required to experience this pain for the rest of your life, and you're not allowed to end it. So, very much a huge, excuse me. Sorry, very much a huge proponent of it. There was a man a few years ago who was a very prominent lawyer in my area of Tennessee, whose final legal fight was to try to get death with dignity legalized in Tennessee. Unfortunately, he ended up passing away before he was ever able to see that through. And there are still people that fight for that all over the world. And I support those causes because when we start to step away from this supernatural, there's an afterlife mindset type stuff, I think what it does is it requires us to take a much harder look at what's happening around us and the suffering that's happening around us. Um, it seems a little strange to me. I think a lot of times that more hardcore religious people are not more on board with death with dignity. You would think they would want to get to that super fun bonus life a little quicker. But again, when I really started stepping away from this idea that there is anything more after this, when I started looking at the world in a sense of, yeah, sometimes just really shitty things happen to people and there's nothing that can be done. It's just the way that it is. And it just sucks. And when that happens, I think the answer is we provide as much fucking comfort as we can. And if somebody says my time's done and my stop is next, then I have absolutely no qualms about supporting them in that. So definitely, Jasmine, we do appreciate you giving us a call at the very least, even though we didn't have you on for long for whatever technical problem. But I know that's definitely something that I'm a huge proponent of and always willing to shout out about. So Ben, do you have any other thoughts on that, or you want to grab another call?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's grab the next one.
Let's do it. And just a reminder, folks, we do have more open lines. Okay, we do have more open lines. So if you've got something you want to say, we want to hear it. But let's go out to Ohio. We've got Nate, him hanging out with us today. It sounds like you've got something interesting on your mind, Nate. How are you?
I'm good. First time caller. How you guys doing?
Hey, great. We're glad you're hanging with us.
Excellent. Yeah. So I kind of maybe said it a little bit too dramatically to the screener, but so here's my thought. Not all religions necessarily, but the ones I'm talking about, so Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and so on and so forth, these are things that I believe, maybe to a lesser degree, Hinduism, but they they seem to require certitude, so absolute belief in the propositions and the doctrines, right? So faith struggles against doubt. So in these religions, skepticism is the enemy and certitude is the goal, right? Do you agree with that?
Maybe not 100%, but I don't think the nuances matter just yet. I kind of want to see where you're going with it. But yeah, I would say largely probably you're going to find more religious people not exactly excited about doubt, believing things on the whole faith stuff, no evidence. Yeah, probably. But yeah, where are you going with this?
Okay, yeah, generally. Okay, so for these religions and others that require this kind of certitude or have this sort of certitude as a goal, it requires that they suspend their disbelief because, and I say that because you have to suspend disbelief if you're going to believe in, let's say, talking donkeys or Mohammed's night journey or burning bushes that speak to people and things like that. There are very few people, I think, that have no doubts whatsoever about the plausibility of these propositions.
Yeah.
So the suspension of disbelief, I think this is the key part, is not the same thing as positive belief.
Mm-hmm.
So, because once you know that you don't know for sure, once you acknowledge that, you're suspending your disbelief, you do not have the certitude that is required of your religion. So my conclusion here is that there are very few actual believers, very, very, very few. And the ones that are the kind of people who, are going to believe without hesitation in talking burning bushes and stuff like that. So for the vast majority of people, I would say, if not all, there are no believers, just suspenders of disbelief. And I wanted to try that on for size and see what you guys thought of that.
Yeah, I have a couple of different thoughts. One of them for sure, kind of what Ben and I were talking about with our first caller today, where I do think in these types of interactions or conversations, it is worth being, really as charitable as we can be. We're not always, we're humans, so we don't always do the best job of making the words and the mouth noises and stuff. So sometimes we just don't say things super, well, and it's always a better call to say like, hey, do you really mean this, or is this how you really feel about it? And if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I'm a believer in something, I do think it's worth it to kind of just take them at face value on that. If you have some reason later on, if you have some, evidence that kind of indicates that, hey, you don't believe this, or you're hypocritical because you say you believe this, but then you act this, well, then that's a bit of a different story, But one thing that kind of comes to my mind, Nate, because I think there are definitely some people out there. I've probably even had conversations with them where I think the way that you're kind of hashing this difference out probably would apply to them. But I really do feel like I have also met people that really, really hardcore believe, and the things that they believe and like the reasons that they say why they believe are really almost exactly the same as a bunch of other people, And so it's kind of hard to, suss out between those, I guess. For me, one of the biggest thoughts in my head, and I don't want this to, sound like I'm, talking down to you or coming at you harsh or anything, Nate, but let's say tomorrow we figured something out that just showed what you were saying is 100% correct. What do you think that changes about the landscape right now? What do you think that does for us? Do you feel that if more of the non-religious view the religious in this way, like maybe we can get some more secular humanism spread around? Or do you think like, we're never going to be able to tackle these unfounded beliefs unless we see it like this? Where do you see this kind of line of thinking leading to? Or is it just, hey, this was an interesting thought I had and I wanted your opinion?
I suppose it's more along the lines of the latter, because if this comes out as definitively proven, it's not like they're going to really that might only serve to strengthen their supposed belief. But
They're still trying to
think
break
that,
down the separation of church and government in America, right? So it's like whether they really believe it or they just suspend disbelief, they're still doing terrible things. But
right, yeah. So I found it interesting what you said about charity, and I don't think you're wrong. And I think maybe I will alter this a little bit, in my dealings with people. But it's the whole charity thing is why I came up with that, because I don't feel like I can take somebody very seriously if I think that they actually believe that instead of are suspending the disbelief. I don't see how that would help me feel more charitably toward them and therefore act more charitably.
sure.
So I could see this being kind of potentially useful for you and how you engage with these people. But I can't necessarily jump on 100% with the majority of people are on this side of the equation versus true believers, because I don't know by what metric we could use to differentiate them, especially if we're just going off of subjective what they say to us and how the conversation goes. But I could see this being useful for you in, let's say, you're having a conversation with someone, kind of Socratically asking them questions, what they believe and why, kind of going down these paths of faith and all that. And let's say you get to a point where you can make it more clear that they are suspending their disbelief. I think that could guide their questions or guide your questions to maybe give them more reasons to doubt what they were previously believing. So I could see it being useful as a technique, but I don't know if I could accept it as a definition per se, or like as a category of their belief per se. But maybe as a technique, sure. I don't know if I see huge problems with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I try to only do this in a Socratic way. So yeah, I think maybe that's where this lands. Is it's just a good technique. Well, anyway, that was it. I just wanted to run that by you, and I think I got a good answer. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate you, Nate. We love good conversations, and even though we all may come to the same conclusions on certain answers, doesn't mean that we come to the same conclusions on everything. And it's worth us being able to push back against each other and have cordial dialogue and try to understand, hey, maybe this method works for you and it doesn't work for me. You're great at that. I'll be honest, Ben. You're so amazing at that. I love when you tell somebody, hey, okay, let's work through this. What are all the possible alternatives as to what this could be? I love when you do that, because I just feel like that really helps people construct themselves an answer that makes sense, right? It's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess it could have been a balloon. Yeah, okay, well, so maybe it's not ghosts, but if you do want to talk about ghosts, we'll take your call. Honestly, if you got soul questions, maybe you got real strong thoughts on the afterlife, give us a call. We got open lines, people. But before we grab another call, I have to tell you some other wonderful things. One of which being, did you know that every Sunday between this awesome show and the awesome atheist experience that happens later at 4:30 Central Time, the flagship show of the ACA, the nonprofits, will be airing live at 3 p.m. So that's today, 3 p.m. Central, between this show and AXP, tiny.cc/YTNP. You can find it. You're going to want to watch it. I have heard that it is some awesome, awesome people. I think this week is Kelly Laughlin, August, and Phil, the Caribbean secularist. I am excited. I am excited. Those are some great people. So make sure you get over there and watch it. And also, the ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community. And for that, we've made it easy, and we've got an updated website. All you got to do is go to www.atheist-community.org, and you can learn all about the organization itself, its policies, how you can get involved. There are ways to contact us. And one of those easy ways to contact us is email us at tv@atheist-community.org. We always want to know what you liked, what you didn't like. It, again, maybe you're a Ben stan and you're big into his camp. I honestly, I get that. I do. But maybe you like me better. You can say those things to us too. But before all the niceties and stuff, Ben, do you know that there are other shows that the ACA does, not just Talk Heathen, right?
Wait, what? We're not the only ones?
No. There's a few.
Man.
There's the flagship show, The Nonprofits, later today. Atheist Experience later today. Secular Sexuality comes out 7 p.m. Central on Thursdays. Truth Wanted, actually, 7 p.m. Central on the Fridays. So I don't know what you were doing last week, Ben, but it sounds like you were busy. So for everybody that missed any of the shows last week, here's a taste of what you missed.
Had one particular horror story where the couple had bought the doll and bonded to her, oh, we love her, Kara. Or not Kara, I'll use another name.
Okay. If we had an election tomorrow, the current government would be pretty much obliterated. So we are kind of shifting back to the middle.
We're a world-class exporter of crazy. We're very good at that. I'm not surprised.
Does the arrival of the heifers in Israel set in motion the coming of the Messiah, or the return of Jesus, as Christians believe?
Do you mind if I try to answer that, Scott? I think I might be able to. Let me
Please
just check my notes here real quick. No. You, a professing Christian with a repentant heart, Thomas, still sin. And since all sins are the same in the eyes of God, kind of sounds like all of that is what you would affectionately call bull.
I don't know how you got this so wrong, but you are now on mute.
You're just saying
and you know who's not saying to me anymore? You.
And we are back. And before we go any further, I have to remind everybody about something super duper cool that is happening in the Austin area. So if you can get out to Austin, Texas between October 27th and October 30th, why not consider joining us in the studio audience at the ACA Free Thought Library for live broadcasts of Secular Sexuality, the Truth Wanted Halloween special, Talk Heathen, and the Atheist Experience, y'all. So this is a big one. All the freaking shows except for the flagship. That's okay. Maybe in the future. But if you get there, the doors are opening at 6 p.m. on Thursday and Friday and noon on Sunday. Parking is wherever you can find a legal spot after the lot is full. So if you get there a little early, you get a better parking spot. And if you can't make it out this month, again, October 27th to October 30th, that's okay, because we will keep broadcasting live from the library the last week of every single month. So make sure to keep watching this show. Go check out the website, atheist-community.org, for all the news and info, and watch all the other shows too, because they're great and they'll keep you up to date as we expand the in-studio offerings in the future. Ben, you were out there once, weren't you? You were out there. So
I hosted Talk Heathen out there. Yes, and it is as magical as they all say it is. I know we try to debunk these supernatural ideas, but I think there's I don't believe in a god, but maybe there's fairies or something that makes the ACA library just so much more magical than this virtual experience.
I think it just happens to sit on a cross plane between like two different like multiverse realities, and it's like a weak spot there, and so there's kind of like a wormhole or something. I feel like all of that physics
it makes sense.
Right. Yeah, it does. Okay, cool, cool.
Or it might have just been the fact that I was hungry and they gave me pizza, and we all know that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So maybe it's just the pizza talking, but it was a great time. Met some great people, and I highly recommend people go hang out there. I mean, I met some people who've been watching the show for a while, and we We had a great time chatting about all things skepticism and the things going on there. So highly recommend you make your way out there.
It's not a bad trip, you know. I'm gonna have to. I can't get out there in October, but I'm thinking November. I think I might be able to get out there. But yeah, October 27th to October 30th, guys. You can watch Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, Talk Heathen, Atheist Experience. I just think that's freaking awesome. So I know more and more people are gonna take advantage of that and go hang out and stuff. And I will definitely keep everybody up to date when I am getting out there for sure. So we can all eat a bunch of pizza and talk about how God probably doesn't exist. But but let's see if we've got somebody on the line, folks. We do still have time, and if you've got a burning question, you know what to do. You just give us a call. You 512-991-9242. Easy peasy. Or call us on your computer, tiny.cc/callth. But while we're waiting for some other calls, we've got a couple of good ones, and we're going to go out to Arizona. We're going to be hanging with Stephen, he, him. Has a little bit of question about evolution and atheism and altruism. How are you, Stephen?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Ben and I are just hanging out and blaspheming. But what have you got for us today, man?
So, over the last few years, as we know, in the United States anyway, but also other countries, we've always had this strain of the progressive and the forward-looking and the forward-thinking versus what I'll refer to as the fearful. And it feels like beyond just simple pendulum swinging back and forth between political extremes, there's been more of a rage that seems to have been released. And I feel like, in my observations, that there is a group of people who are community-minded, compassionate, empathetic, who are able to believe those things with or without a God. I'm an atheist. But then there's this other group that is so driven by, I'm going to say fear, because I think everything comes back to that. That eventually expresses itself as hate and rage and all these other crazy things. Excuse me. That uses religion as the shield to justify their behavior in a lot of cases. The Bible says this, or the Quran says that, or whatever book they have, Harry Potter, I don't know. So I'm wondering if overall, I've been having this thought that maybe we are beginning to evolve to another level of psychology or altruism. I mean, humans have always been tribal. We kind of have evolved that way in what our concerns are, and we seek tribes. When our families are small, we seek other groups that will keep us safe, not even necessarily think the way we do, but tell us what to think, and we'll go along with it so we'll feel safe. And there's sort of this progression because you see the growing nuns, N-O-N-E-S, in this country who don't believe in any particular religion. You see parts of Western Europe where the countries are much more non-religious or atheist, and other communities sprouting up around the world that are saying we can be good people and be community-minded without believing in a deity, without believing in a religion. And I feel like it feels like we're splitting almost into two species in that way, that there's a group of us who can think one way very easily.
I love where your thoughts are going. I do want to jump in so that we can have more of a dialogue here. But I want to clarify real quick. What do you mean when you say evolution? Are we talking a biological process? Are we talking? Are we using evolution as a term metaphorically to mean a shift in thought process? How exactly are you using this term?
Well, kind of both. What I mean by it in particular, I'll go back to the tribal example. So first you worry about your family, then you worry about your extended family, then you worry about your tribal community. And that eventually grows up to be a country and goes on from there. And for some of us, I have a particular set of experiences. I've worked around the world. I've lived outside of the United States. You see commonalities in the way that people want happiness in their family, in their lives, whether it's who they love or how they love or whatever it is. So, and what their goals are to be successful, whether it's in a capitalist society or wherever. But they want that for everyone, regardless of what the differences may be, where there is a separate group that is behind, in my view, that doesn't get to that point of everybody gets to have this. It's a difference between everybody gets to have this or you only get to have this if you are still part of my tribe, whatever that means. And I feel like that extra step is either a psychological shift or is it something biological that lets us feel that way?
I want to ask some questions again, because I want to take this in a direction where we think kind of what brought us here. So we have this, if you're saying this end result, at least right now, is that these different communities are developing to where one favors altruism and that kind of thing, and you have this other group that hasn't really moved past looking out for their own group. What factors do you think may have led up to this? Like, if we take humanity over the course of its development, what has changed about now versus back when humans were more tribally focused?
Okay, we can say, well, the quick and easy, stupid answer, pardon me, is technology. But in between the very beginning of this tribal stuff to where we are now, we've had these impositions of things that maintain the tribalism. So whether it's language, whether it's religion, whether it's nationality or ethnicity, you look like me and I look like you, so we're part of the same group, thumbs up, let's go get a pizza. Since we were talking about pizza, now I'm hungry. So you have all of that going on that kept it enforced, that kind of held down this idea. And part of it is, in my upbringing, there was a certain level of, I'll call it patriotism, because jingoism is a better word, that the American standard of how we make government was better than what they had done before, because we established a secular state, right? We said goodbye to religion, and that was supposed to be a step forward, as one example, that we finally reached that in this country. So much for that. Look at where we are. But anyway, so there were always these structures that were imposed on us to keep that mindset going. When I lived in Europe, I said to people, we are a manufactured state as a country. That's why we have to do the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. We have to be reminded that we're American, in my view. So it's this idea of continually imposing systems. And then in the last 30 years with the internet, give or take, you have this ability to look cross borders and look across into other communities and get other information to say, wait a minute, they want the same.
So besides technology, because even before the internet, right, we had communication between cultures, and I think it's not as much technology as it is communication. And I think globalism especially has taken us to this place where we're at now, because looking back, you had trade between different groups of people, and if the only thing you knew about this other group was that we trade with them, they have things that are different than me, it's very easy to isolate yourself and say, yeah, we're the only ones that matter. These other people just bring us stuff and we trade and they leave. But as we've, established more communication, I think that's the key variable here. And I don't know if I can point to anything specifically biologically that would make people more or less altruistic. And I don't even know if we have evidence to say that we are more altruistic now. If we look back at different cultures, you look at examples like ancient Persia had very good examples of bringing in captives from war, and they would often let people have their religion that they had been using. They had prioritized science and working towards a more welcoming society. So I think it's a bit incorrect to say that we're heading in that direction, because I don't know if we have enough evidence to assert that.
Well, in fairness, I appreciate your example. I don't know that I agree with it as a good one, because there was still a structure that, I mean, you may be welcome to bring in your religion, but I don't think they would let those slaves or captives come in and convert the populace that was there and say this is a better idea. They still
well, that's not what we're arguing. That's not what we're discussing, though, right? We're discussing an altruistic society. So if you're going to make the claim that we are more altruistic now, or we're heading in that direction, having an example of, well, these people were structured doesn't negate the fact that they might be more or equal to the altruism that we have, right?
How would you, just real quick,
Well,
Stephen,
I
how would
think-
you determine if we are more altruistic in today, 2022, than we were, say, in 202, right? What would you use to kind of demonstrate that to us?
I think there are more people now, and it goes back to what Nate was talking about a little bit. I think you have gradations in the level of belief. We have, using the United States as an example, because we're all here, and it's the easiest one to access. You have the really hardcore, pardon my French, crazy people who are hardcore religious fanatics, who are believe the Bible literally, or whatever book they're using literally, and that it's a miracle and blah, blah, blah. And then you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, and there's us, because I'm thinking you guys are closer to where I am than that other end. So probably, but there is this spectrum of people all the way in between. And what I'm not saying we're all more altruistic. We're definitely not all more altruistic, but there is a group of us that I consider myself a part of. You're both lovely, but I don't care what you do in the bedroom. I don't. And you might have a trapeze. I don't know. And good for you. I don't care what your belief system is. Well, yeah. I just hope you put the net underneath, but never mind.
Yeah,
so anyway,
yeah. Safety first.
But there are ways I don't want to see you suffer. When I look at some of this stuff on TV, whether it's the people in the storm or the war or whatever's going on, and even all the stuff that came up with the pandemic, I wore a mask, not only so I wouldn't get sick, but if I was sick, you wouldn't get sick. I cared about that. And particularly in this area of Arizona, if you've seen any YouTube video of people attacking mask displays, it was right here, like within 10 minutes of my house. So I'm seeing that. I go to the 7-Eleven and there's a guy with a gun.
So here's my issue. I think we're relying here a lot on personal experiences and kind of the circles that you've been around. Like, how would we quantify levels of altruism? If I'm to say that we are more or less altruistic now, and then bringing in the point too of atheists being more or less altruistic than these theists, like how do we measure that? How do we quantify that? Could we statistically determine if a group is more altruistic than another? Because it's a very subjective measure that I just don't know if we can move beyond. And I have an opinion about these people, because I mean, we do have plenty of atheists who are not altruistic and who are making things worse in the community. But I'm not usually associated with them. I don't hang around those people, so I know fewer of them personally. But how could we quantify which groups had more altruistic people than others, and how do we even measure that?
And that's a fair point. And I don't know that you can necessarily, I'm using the belief systems and religious systems perhaps inefficiently here. But my feeling is, like, I have Mormons who live across the street. They're lovely and they bring me food all the time. and you know, whether it's homemade chicken soup, baked bread, whatever. They know I'm a Democrat. They're Republicans. I had to look at a Trump flag all through the election. But we get along because they actually care about people. I don't know why they vote the way they do. I think their religion is Looney Tunes. Sorry for all the Mormons in the audience. But they themselves are lovely, and they actually care about their neighbors. They care about me, the bisexual Democrat living across the street, and bring me bread and soup and fruit and whatever. So it's not specific to a religion or a belief system. Sure. I get that. But they also don't want anyone to suffer. They don't want anyone to get sick. They don't want anyone to be a victim of crime, just like I do. And yet there are people that feel like, because of my sexuality, my sister wanted me to move to Tennessee. I was like, where do you want to put the bullseye? I don't know how you live there. Between being
as somebody who is in Tennessee, I definitely, but
like,
let me,
you know,
let me jump in for a second here, Stephen, because I think there are some pretty good points and some stuff we can kind of just highlight a little bit and stuff. One, I think that you were describing earlier about that innate sense in the people, the Mormons across the street for you, where at the end of the day, they really don't want to see other human beings suffer, whether they agree or disagree with them on political stances or ideology when it comes to old books and you know, all that stuff. I think that is something that runs through all of us. I think oftentimes what happens is we don't exactly have it calibrated the best that it could be. And that's why I tend to gravitate towards things like secular humanism, because I think that is a better calibration in terms of who we extend that, what I like to call, give a shit to. It's just pretty simple, right? I mean, exactly, who is it that we care about? And it seems to be the case that, you know, for all of us, there is at least some answer to that question. It may not be every single person in the world, but we have family or friends, we have coworkers or loved ones of all kinds that matter to us. And sometimes we just don't extend that same give a shit to those other people. You know, the person that cuts us off in traffic instantly becomes a bad person, when in reality, you know, they're probably a decent person, and maybe they just didn't see, maybe they're in a bad mood today, right? But I do think that kind of thread is something that goes through all of us as people. And I, just to kind of get back to, you know, an evolution going on in humanity, kind of what you called in about initially, I think, yeah, we are seeing more of a shift in culture, but at the end of the day, kind of what Ben and I were saying, I don't know that I really have anything to indicate that, really. You know, I have a feeling, and I have some anecdotes, and I like to think that we're going in that direction, right? Like, it makes me feel better when I wake up in the morning that that's where we're going. But I don't 100% know. And I don't exactly know how we would quantify that. I'm still going to fight for that. That's why I'm going to, you know, keep hanging out here and doing shows and hanging with Ben and chatting up with all the good friends that we have and stuff, and still keep fighting for that progress, fighting for that better world. But are we there yet? I don't know. Are we even moving in that direction? Honestly, I don't know. But I think the more we talk about that, and the more we ask whether we're moving in the right direction, the more likely we are to have that calibration better, and the more likely we are to go in the right direction. But Ben, was there anything else you wanted to say? I think it was a good call, Stephen. But I throw it over to you, Ben, if you want to wrap up something.
I had a point, actually. I'll let Ben jump in before I say.
No, you go for it really quick, and then
give us real quick, and we'll let you go, and we'll move on.
The reason the reason I ask this is it feels like there are certain members of our society, our species, who are just an absolute brick wall in having these discussions. Like, everything you just said is perfectly reasonable and perfectly relatable, and to everybody, one would hope. But yet there are still people in our society who are like, No, you don't believe the way I do. No, you don't love the way I do. No, you don't eat the way I do. So no. And you don't get any of my empathy, compassion, anything, that it's such a brick wall that in my experience, and granted it's anecdotal, but it just seems so prevalent that I wonder if there's always going to be people who aren't at that level yet, I guess is what I mean. And we all have 10 fingers and 10 toes, presumably. But, I remember reading articles 30 years ago that said we don't need the last toe on our foot. So someday in the future, we'll only have 8 toes. Who knows?
Well, we'll definitely talk about that another time, Stephen. But we do appreciate your call. Thank you so much. I think again, this is the way that we do get better, is by constantly asking whether or not we are going in the right direction. But Ben, give me your thoughts on that, man. I was talking a lot there.
Yeah, I think that last statement, I don't know if I would chalk this up to something that is innate within people, or that is a cause of biology. I mean, sure, some people might be more biologically inclined to think in certain ways, but I think a lot of it's related to upbringing and what you're raised to think. And some people who are raised to hate other people are more likely to continue hating other people. And as you're seeing, like, young children, it's very difficult to get a young child to actually hate somebody, but they grow up and learn to do that. So I would chalk it up more to a nurture thing than to an evolutionary nature thing. But I'm sure there's a lot more nuance to that conversation that I don't really know much about, because that's a whole area of sociology and psychology that I don't study. But it's definitely worth looking into, about kind of the nuance on that.
Yeah, and I think on the biology side of evolution, I mean, again, definitely not in any way, shape, or form my wheelhouse, but I mean, my understanding is that the idea that, like, evolution just stopped once people were around, like, that's not the case, right? Yes, of course, our species is still evolving, but as far as I know, again, we currently don't have anything that's like, hey, this is huge. This is a huge evolution in our genes, and that just totally makes us a different species now, or anything. So if we do get any of that, though, I mean, that'd be pretty fun. I'd love to find that. I would be cool with being like a slightly different, advanced here. I don't know. I don't know what we evolve into, so maybe it's not gonna be as cool as I want it to be. But we have, before we move on, we have got to shout out the top 5 patrons, because those people are absolutely awesome, and without them, it is always a little bit harder to make things happen. So the top 5 patrons of the week: number 1, Eric Tweet; number 2, Dingleberry Jackson; number 3, Balam's Donkey; number 4, Devor Valjen; number 5, Ayame; and an honorable mention to the awesome Colson Craig. So we appreciate every single one of you, and even if you are not in the top 5 and you are a patron, we absolutely appreciate that support. It really does help us out, and it means a lot to us. So we are getting to the latter half here, Ben, but we've got a couple more calls. How do you feel about talking about some Jesus Christ here a little? You want to?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. We are going out to California. Nate, he, him. You're saying we may have gotten JC's gender wrong. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we all know. Let me just walk away from here. My dog is playing with something. It's 1 second.
Oh yeah, you got a bit of noise going on in the background. I don't know if you're.
Yeah, is it better now?
Still a little bit. Are you on speakerphone by any chance?
Okay. No. I'm on my phone, no speaker. Sweet. It should be good now, for sure.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll yell at you if it gets too unbearable.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, well, we all know that in the Bible, right, according to the fable or the story or whatever it is, Jesus Christ was born of a virgin, which means technically his mother Mary, that is, did not have sex with anybody, right? And he was born. And so let us assume for a quick second, if we give that the benefit of the doubt and say that if that is the only documented case of asexual reproduction in human history, right? It's possible. I'm talking possible, impossible, not saying likely, unlikely, right?
Sure.
If that's the only case of case of asexual reproduction in human beings, then Jesus Christ should be a clone of his mother, because if you looked at all the other species that asexually reproduce, right? You have Komodo dragons, you have some species of python that do it, great white sharks, and so many other species, which are not so very different from us. What happens is the progeny happens to be a very close match to their mothers, right? Which means then Jesus Christ should be a very close match to Mother Mary.
Yeah.
Right?
So I know where you're going with this, and I actually, I have a little bit of pushback because, biologically, yes, you would get someone who would be XX and a clone of their mother, assuming that Mary was also XX, which we have to make an assumption there. But I want to push back because gender is different than your biological sex, right? Do we agree on that?
Yes, absolutely.
So my perspective on this, and I'm a trans man. So if Jesus, regardless of his biology, if he's assigned male, if he was born and was called a boy and then called a man and that did not change from his birth, he would be a man.
Yeah,
right.
He would be absolutely 100% on your side there, right? But if you went and asked any Christian today, right, they would sort of guard, metaphorically speaking, that Jesus was male, isn't it? Complete out and out male, in the sense of male that they recognize males.
But did you ask them? Have you gone down that conversation with them? Because I don't want to straw man somebody else's perspective, and I do know Christians who are in favor of trans rights and who wouldn't have a problem with that. So I want to be careful a little bit on how we engage with that particular point. But have you asked people about this particular issue?
No, not yet. No, not yet. I mean, this thought is very recently germinated in my head while I was thinking of this. Now, I've not read science per se, right? But I keep an interest in science, so I know that if there is asexually reproduced progeny, that has to be genetically extremely close or pretty much a clone of its mother, right?
Correct, and I'm not disagreeing with you there.
Why would there be an exception in this case is my question.
Yeah, it's not necessarily an exception, but the problem is, like, you have this book that has Jesus living as a male. So regardless of what someone's biology is, like I was assigned female, and I'm pretty sure that I have not been karyotyped, but I'm pretty sure my chromosomes are XX, and I know what I was born with, anatomically speaking, and I can go and engage with society as a man, and nobody knows for the most part that I'm trans. So even if Jesus had been a clone of Mary, he could still engage with society as a man, right? And people writing about him could still have no reason to question whether or not he was a man. So I don't know the exact relevance of even if there's a biological inconsistency there. I don't quite see how that would change the story.
Yeah, and just real quick, Nate, I think in part one of the things that Ben is highlighting here, which I really appreciate, and I'm glad he said this, is the difference between sex and gender, and how, yeah, there are some things about both of these categories that overlap a little, but in reality, these are different things. And if what you're saying is at the end of the day, hey, kind of based on the story, just taking it at face value, it would seem on a biological sense that, yeah, Jesus probably had XX chromosomes, but that doesn't really matter when it comes to, gender and how Jesus portrayed himself and how the rest of the community engaged with him and all of that stuff. Now, let's also be honest here and just say, for sure, I think on Ben and my part, we're being pretty damn charitable about the Bible, giving a super accurate account of this fella's life and all that, right? And I think that's something that's also worth remembering too, is that when we're on a non-religious side, oftentimes we're going to look at these types of fanciful stories and we'll try to, especially if we're being really charitable, we'll try to work them into the most, reasonable, naturalistic, something we've got evidence for type of answer, right? When in reality, a lot of times the answer for a believer in a supernatural entity of some kind, afterlife, Yahweh, whatever, right? A lot of times the answer is, oh, well, my God is just powerful enough to do the thing that you say it can't be done, And so at the end of the day, I think for a lot of people, if we go talk to them and we get them to sit down and do a basic biology course with us and we walk them through parthenogenesis and talk about, chromosomes and how you get some from one parent and some from the other. And if we did all of that, I think for a lot of people, we'd get to the point at the end where they go, yeah, but God, like I understand why it doesn't work on the math and the paper and the lab, but God, right? I mean, God did it. So I think it's kind of a fun, thought experiment maybe to play with and kind of work with. But definitely when it comes to like, I would say convincing, believers that, hey, maybe some of this is unfounded. I don't know that this is exactly the best route. But still, like I said, I enjoy talking about stuff like this, sitting around, Friday nights at a bar, drinking and laughing about stuff. I mean, I say, hey man, you know what kills me is you got all these hardcore fundamentalists today, so anti-LGBTQ, they don't even realize that their savior is actually trans. I love trans.
He's on their
Jesus.
side.
I love that.
That's
thought.
what I'm saying.
So
he's actually on their side, and he's always been on their side. And for 2,000 years, an overwhelming vast majority of everybody has been taken for a ride. That's where I was coming from. That not 1 or 2 years, but 2,000 years, we've gotten it all wrong, right? That's all my point was. And I thought it was an interesting ponder, given the lay kind of person I am. I'm not a science person or anything like that, as in I've not read science. But from what I've read, I thought this is how it should be, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, I think this is definitely, this is something kind of fun. I like to play around with thoughts like this. Like what is the best possible answer as to how Noah was able to get all these animals and all that jazz, but even still, I think at the end of the day, there are some other things that maybe are a little bit more worthwhile when, especially engaging with believers, to kind of go down that route. But at the same time, Nate, I mean, we really, really appreciated your call. I like I said, I love kind of going through that stuff and kind of working it out and seeing where it all shakes out and what the most possible answer is. Ben, it looks like we have some other calls, but do you have any other thoughts or anything on that one before we move on?
I feel like, there's no way to get around this now. You've all been already discussing this, but I have to come out to all of you and say that I am actually trans Jesus. Like, I am the second coming of trans Jesus. So I know you've been waiting for far too long. I went to get cigs and some milk, and I forgot to come back, but here I am.
I
I'm back, everyone.
I always wondered that you never seem to step in a puddle, Ben, and I never could figure out
Right.
why. I didn't know if it was just like good footman work or whatever, good footwork. I wasn't sure, but now I know. So everybody out there, you're welcome. You don't do you do blessings? We'll talk after the show. We'll talk.
Yeah, we can talk. Yeah,
I've got a
yeah.
sacrifice or something I'm gonna give to you. Whatever. Anyway, let's go out to Massachusetts. We've got Brandy, she, her, wants to talk a little bit about religious beliefs and altruism, it sounds like. So hey, how are you?
I am so well. Thank you for asking. Oh, yes, I want to talk about altruism, about the caller Steve the time before. But first, I have to put a little, I have to dovetail a little bit on student Ben's description of the difference between gender and sexual orientation. The last caller was really getting to me, and it's actually motivating me because I'm literally in the middle of writing a talk about the difference between cis and non-cis and descriptions of gender and gender expression and gender performance. And I'm gearing this towards senior citizens. So that's what I'm literally took an hour break to listen to y'all's show. And now I got to hear that caller. Oh goodness. It doesn't matter what chromosomes Jesus or whatever rabbi had 2,000 years ago, what their gender is. It has nothing to do with their chromosomes. I know for sure I'm XY chromosome. It has nothing to do with me being a woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
50 years old. I'm out in public and most people read me as a cis woman. And so, I'm like, no, we cannot be talking to, and then trying to blame it on our religious people and say religious people aren't going to understand it. You're not understanding that.
Well, let's what was it that you called today about? It sounded like altruism and religion, and like it looked like it said you say those don't have anything to do with each other.
That flow through each other. Altruism is through our species. I studied anthropology in school with an emphasis and concentration on hominid evolution, and I looked at the fossil evidence going back through our group of humans that we call anatomically modern human. We see it going throughout these groups for hundreds of thousands of years. And we even see it in groups that we intermingled with, the other human groups, like the Neanderthals and the Denisovans and all of these other hominid groups of humans that were around. We see altruism through all of them. They all lived in small to mid-sized groups. They all were highly social with each other. They all may have had some sort of abstract thinking about life beyond their non-animation, right?
Yeah. And you're saying that that's something that is just kind of innate to the human experience rather than a religious aspect being put on top of it. Okay. I think that's interesting. Yeah. I think I'd largely agree with that. I mean, I think oftentimes what happens is the belief systems around the world try to co-opt that stuff, like definitely that's one thing we see in the whole atheist community, right? There's always a group of people that's like, oh, we can't have a community because that's religious, and then the religious people are like, that's right, see, you can't have a community because we're the only ones that do it. Yeah, I think definitely there's a lot of co-opting that happens from the religions, and altruism I think is one of the biggest ones that they've tried to steal and make their own, but we're fighting back, we're reclaiming it. So but yeah, go ahead.
ACA. I was going to say, especially at the ACA, as a trans person, I walk through society, and whether I choose to or not, I can identify myself as trans or not, because I have that privilege and that fortune to be in that position where I'm read as this woman. So I usually, depending on who I'm around, how well that person knows me, I will say, I'll talk about things that are trans or trans issues. If I'm just out in general public, it usually doesn't come up until I bring it up. But when around atheist communities, like I went to the studio there in Austin for the 1000th recording in the studio with
That's
Steph Anderson. Yes. And I saw a live Talk Heathen. Back then it was Eric and Jamie. And it was wonderful. And I didn't feel I should hold back at all. The minute I walked in the door, I was like, hi, I'm Brandy. I'm an atheist and I'm a trans woman, right? I get that around a community. I do not dare do that around a religious community. I have the privilege of traveling all over this country. And when I'm in lots of places, I do not bring up the subject, and because I have to read my audience, and that needs to change. And I'm working on my activism to help change that. But it is a fact that I feel way more comfortable in an atheist environment than a religious environment.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's a lot of people that would totally stand, hand in hand with you right there, Brandy. And we're glad that you have received such a warm welcome. And we want to make sure that this community is welcoming for all people. We always talk about it, at the end and say like, whether you believe or not, we always want people here. We want people to know that this is a safe space. So I'm really glad that has been the case for you. And I'm glad you called us today and shared us your story, because I think that is important. And I think it's always worth remembering that the religious community does not have a stranglehold on being a good person. They just don't, because we can absolutely do it. And people like you and people like Ben and all the wonderful crew here, we show that stuff time and time again. So again, Brandy, I'm so glad that you called in. You told us about that awesome experience you've had, because yeah, I that always warms my heart. So, but it looks like, Ben, we are getting close here to the end, but it looks like we might have one other caller we want to grab before we move on. Real quick though, I mean, how have your experience been in a handful of different atheist communities? I know you were down at the Free Thought Library, and you told me it was such a great time. But overall, would you say that it's been a really positive experience for you? Do you think it's kind of been a mixed bag? Where's
I
it
think
shake out?
at least for me, the communities that I've been involved in have all been good experiences, but it depends on who you talk to, and you go to places like, I know Twitter's definitely the best place to go for all of your community needs. Just kidding. Do not go to Twitter for that. But we're seeing like a lot of the gender critical movement is atheist, or is made of atheists. So I've been accused of being religiously thinking in the fact that I'm trans and that I believe in trans rights. So it's definitely a mixed bag. So it just depends on who you're around.
Yeah, for sure. But we try here. And, if we're doing a good job and you appreciate it, tell us a comment below, send an email. If we mess up, same thing. I mean, if we do something wrong, folks, we want to know. We want that feedback, because we do want to make this a welcoming space for everyone. So, but with that, we are near the end, and we've got one other person that is hanging out with us today. Russell, him in Virginia. It sounds like you've got a little bit of a hard time on your hands, Russell. What's going on?
Yeah, so I don't know if you've heard, there's a Filipino church, I guess we're going to call it a church, called Iglesia Ni Cristo, which technically translates to Church of Christ. And they've gotten, I guess, they've got kind of a foothold in the United States, but they're obviously much more popular in the Philippines. And I am currently dating a woman who is a member of that church. And, they are one of those very extreme cult-like churches that takes a lot of behavioral control over its members. So, for example, if they were to find out that the two of us were dating, she could be excommunicated. They could potentially institute shunning against her, like similar to how they do it in the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Scientologists. All of her family are kind of members of this faith. Fortunately, they're not extreme enough to potentially throw us out or disown her or anything like that. But I've been one of the things that has to happen in order for us to do something like get married would be to, I would have to join, which is of course a long, very involved process that takes months and months and months and a lot of time. And, it really hits my, it really hits me right in the ethics when I hear these people talk. I mean, they're obviously anti-homosexual. They're a very fundamentalist Christian church. And I guess, I've been trying, I've been reading books by Stephen Hassan and others, trying to figure out kind of how to talk about this religious group and all of the horrible things that they've done, up to and including murders, embezzling, and quite a few other things, mostly limited to areas of the Philippines. But when I talk to her about this, she gets very upset. She has, thought-stopping techniques. She just screams, cries, tears. And even when you try to do it in a very gentle manner, like the Socratic method, as soon as she realizes where the conclusion is going, it's like she shuts down. And I've actually heard her before. I enjoy, fantasy novels and fiction and things like that. And I've actually heard her before say, I don't understand if you like these wizards and dragons and whatever else and all these fantasy books, why don't you just believe in God? Because then magic would be in the world. And so it speaks to an inability to separate what's real from what I want to be true. And I don't know how to get that across. And so I want to hear your thoughts on kind of how to deal with these people that are trapped in this psychological prison from these, harmful groups.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I just want to acknowledge that this does sound like a very difficult situation to be in. I think probably for both of you, right? Both you and your girlfriend. This is probably something that it takes a lot of mental effort, it takes a lot of emotional effort, and it's worth always remembering that. I think on both sides. I'll be just straight up blunt.
That's absolutely true.
Right. I mean, always helpful for that. Right. But I'll be straight up blunt with it, man, in the sense that, I definitely don't have the answers for a perfect relationship. I don't know what the best advice is when it comes to things like this. More often than not, where I find myself time and time again is listening to people that are well versed in this, that have spent years of their lives studying things, and are able to talk about methods and techniques that have been well practiced and well studied and do have a better result in the end. I can say that I never in any way, shape, or form am concerned about who I promote recovering from religion to. It is an absolutely beautiful organization that uses secular, scientific methods with trained individuals. It is not a place that is actively trying to strip people of their religion or change their minds on anything. It is a place where you can go and talk with somebody who, maybe has been in a similar situation, or maybe just hearing yourself ask a certain question out loud for the first time just kind of pushes past a block for you. I always think in these kinds of difficult moments where especially a belief system that falls a lot closer on that bite model than I would ever want it to, that those can be hard conversations. And sometimes one of the best things ever is just having somebody as a sounding board who is trained, again, in time and time again, proven techniques and methods. We actually have data. We can go back and we can say, when we do this, these are the results more often than not. And that's why I always love what RFR is doing, and people like Gail and Daryl are just phenomenal. And that might be just a good thing to look into and discuss with your girlfriend. Again, I definitely can't give you any advice because I'm not 100% positive, but I think starting with compassion and charity and trying to figure out for yourself what is your goal. If your goal is to, completely change your girlfriend's mind and make her into the model, atheist activist, well, I'll be honest, maybe that's not the best goal, right? And maybe you should go ahead.
I mean, I honestly, in terms of whether or not somebody is religious and their impact on my interactions with them, I try not to care too much unless they're doing something that's, actively impeding my own rights, which isn't really the case in this case. So if she was, say a Catholic or something, it wouldn't bother me in the slightest. I would just say, okay, disagree about the God question and let's move on. But, I do worry about people, and maybe we can, instead of talking about an individual, kind of expand it to what the broader community can do. There are people that are trapped in these psychological, I guess, bubbles, psychological traps, and they get caught in these kind of extreme beliefs that, these people they're stealing money from them, they're getting them to do things, they're controlling their behavior, they're controlling what they're allowed to believe, what they're allowed to study. And I guess I was not as aware of this as an issue until I sort of stumbled into it and started having, an interaction with an actual cult of extreme belief. And so, I'm wondering, is there a way, or is there a mechanism that we as a community can be more, I guess, accommodating, or we can do more to kind of pull people out of these extreme situations? I mean, the psychology is really hard. And of course, the bite model of authoritarian control has been incredibly useful as a technique for understanding it. But trying to apply it doesn't necessarily work if somebody's been born into something and most of their family members are in something, because it's all about kind of reasserting a personality that's been suppressed. And that's not always the case with somebody that's born into these cults.
Well, and something I just want to emphasize, and of course, I agree 100% that RFR is a great way to go, and they have the Secular Therapy Project as well for if either of you want someone to talk to about more relationship aspects related to how religion is impacting how you two relate to each other. But something that I do want to emphasize a little bit is that, like, being in a relationship with a person like this, they might not be receptive to you. And the fact that you are in that emotional relationship with them as a partner, you might not be the best person to have the conversation with. They might not listen to you as much as they might listen to somebody of a third party, which is, again, why RFR is such a great organization. And something else is that the fact that if they've been raised with something for this long and they haven't really had exposure beyond that, it's going to take time. And it's a process that they have to work through with themselves. And of course, you want things to go faster for them. You might want them to understand things as easily as you have, but that might not be realistic for what the magnitude of the changes that you're asking from them. And you're going to have to be patient. And there's some resources, again, with RFR and the Secular Therapy Project, and I will happily show them all day, every day, but it's not going to be a straightforward process, and there is no easy answer. But I think charitable listening and patience and using these resources are probably going to be the best way to move forward in this.
Yeah, and
I do appreciate you making those available. And I do want to say, and maybe I'll ask one more question, and then, because I know we're running up towards the end of the show. But the other aspect of this is part of the things that I need to do in order to, stave off some of the conflict in this relationship is I have been going to these I guess for lack of a better term, Bible studies, and I've occasionally attended the worship service. And it's obviously frustrating, and it makes me incredibly angry. She obviously senses that, and to another extent, I've learned that any person is potentially susceptible to destructive influence. And so, putting myself in that situation is potentially putting me in a position where, I could be compromised or I could be taken advantage of. And so how much would you recommend that I expose myself to these people for the sake of, I guess, maintaining the peace?
Yeah, definitely. Russell, we're gonna answer that after. We're gonna let you go so that we can make sure everything's wrapped up and everything on our end. But we will answer that right after we let you go. So thank you for giving us a call, and definitely watch back and hear what Ben and I think on that. But again, thank you so much, because I think it's always important to highlight situations like that. Ben, did you have any thoughts on that? How much
I'll let
you
you
should
address this one.
I pretty much always go, and I know that this may sound like a little bit like of a letdown, but what I always tell people in situations like this is truly, you need to have that conversation with yourself, and you really need to be honest, and you need to be critical with yourself, and you need to find out whether or not you are willing to go through all of this. If you are not willing to put in that effort and deal with the consequences of that effort, that's okay. You're not required to. You're not obligated to. But if you aren't, you should know that, and you should be comfortable with that fact and say, look, this is my line. I unfortunately am not able to tell other people, hey, no, you can totally take more, or, no, you're taking way too. It's up for everyone to make that decision for themselves, and what is the thing that they believe is giving them the best benefit. Me personally, I go to the point at which oftentimes I feel as if no progress is being made whatsoever. Like, we're literally rehashing the exact same conversation over and over and over again. And there isn't a desire to try and go further. But that's kind of where I've put my line. What are your thoughts, Ben? And then we'll get out of here, I guess.
I co-sign everything that you just said.
You took the lazy route today, man. You're not doing any of the announcements. You're not doing any of the. Oh my God, this is.
I am trans Jesus, and
I guess you get a pass. Okay? Yeah, I guess that's fair.
Maybe next time you got to eat like 5 communion wafers, and maybe I'll step up and do more.
All right, you heard it, folks. Yeah. Get your communion wafers for trans Jesus Ben. I don't know. How do you feel about wine? You know what? We'll talk about it after the show. Before we get out of here, folks, let me remind you real quick a couple of different ways you could support this awesome channel and this awesome community. Just right below the chat, remember the fundraiser. 100% of those proceeds go directly to the ACA. That is a super, super great way to help. You can always simply just like, subscribe, hit the freaking bell, and share the video, guys. This is always one of the easiest things you can do. Doesn't cost a dime, doesn't take you more than about 5 seconds. And you would be surprised how valuable that is. So definitely do that for us. You can become a member, 99 cents a month if you want. If you want to give more, we'll take it too. You just click that join button. You get all the super sweet emotes. Patreon, tiny.cc/PatreonTH. Definitely go out there and give us a little and support us and help us out, and maybe we'll shout out your name one of the weeks. Don't forget, if you don't really like looking at my face or Ben's face, I think you're objectively wrong, but you can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcast, because it's the channel that the ACA has with all of the awesome shows in the audio podcast form only. Remember to come hang out with us at the Talk Heathen fan run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. And of course, have to mention the flagship show of the ACA, The Nonprofits, coming up right after this at 3 p.m. Central. So tiny.cc/YTNP. And Ben, there's one group of rapscallions and just real bunch of I don't think the words that I can say I'm allowed to say, but can we show the crew? They are absolutely awesome. They are always back there having a good time, working hard, much harder than myself and Ben. And they make us look as good as they possibly can. So the rest is just genetics, I guess.
Which means they're doing a lot of work.
It is.
It takes a lot to make us look even the slightest bit presentable.
Honestly, it really is rough for them. I'm surprised they keep asking us back. But can we get some love rings? I don't know, maybe. Wow. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. I can feel it. I can feel the love. I hope everybody else out there does too, because truly this is a community I am super excited to be a part of, because I've gotten to meet people like Ben and have some wonderful times and stuff. And we want people to feel like our caller today, where she was welcomed, and she was welcomed with open arms and said, "Hey, this is your spot. You can come back." Because truly, there's a lot of stuff that may separate us, but I always find that there are so many damn things that bring us together. And it doesn't matter if you believe or not. If you're out there as an essential worker helping us get through these struggling times, how are we still in the middle of all of this craziness going on worldwide with the pandemic? But if you are still out there day in and day out putting yourself on the line, we really do appreciate you. And we want you to know that there is a group of people out there that we're trying, and we're doing what we can. So if you do not believe, if you are not in that believer camp, that's okay, because we're here. We're here for you. We want you to come hang out with us. We want you to go to the fan run Facebook and watch all the other shows and chat in the live chat and ask questions. And we are always so thrilled when we have more people hanging out with us. And definitely, if you can, folks, get out to the Free Thought Library out in Austin. If not this month, next month. I am excited. I'm looking forward to that. I know I am going to be there before too long. And maybe you'll get to hang out with Ben and myself, or better people. There are other cooler people that probably will be there too. But if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242, or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.